The police came to me and said, "Warrant for your daughter's arrest." I told him the truth. "Your daughter, Anya, has an arrest warrant out for marriage fraud," David said. His kind tone from earlier completely changed. "My daughter? Involved in marriage fraud and arrested? There's no way that could be true." I couldn't believe the words coming from the man claiming to be a police officer. How in the world did things get to this point? That's impossible. Please stop with this nonsense. "I understand how you feel, but this is no nonsense," the other tough-looking man said with an intimidating expression. "This is the truth. There's no way my daughter could be involved in marriage fraud because Anya is... Wait, could these men possibly be... At that moment, an idea for a plan popped into my head. My name is Scarlett Rowan. I've been married to my husband for 5 years now. We've been blessed with children, and I'm working hard each day as a stay-at-home mom. I used to work at a food company as a contract employee in the administrative department. My husband was a salesman who came to my office. After seeing each other many times for work, we naturally grew attracted to each other. After dating for 2 years, we got married. "Have a good day, work hard. You be careful on your way home too," my husband would say as he left for work each morning. I'm currently staying at my husband's parents' house. The other day, my father-in-law contacted us asking if we wanted to visit. When I mentioned it to my husband, he said, "It's been 2 years since we've seen them. Why don't we stay over this time?" So we decided to visit and stay with them for about a week over the weekend. My husband put in a vacation request at his company for this, but that evening his boss contacted him, saying an employee shortage had suddenly come up and asked him to change his vacation to a different month. My husband reluctantly agreed. In the end, work came up for him, so it ended up being just my daughter and me going to stay with my in-laws. Their house is about a 5-hour drive from ours in the next state over. It's a peaceful area surrounded by nature, with fields stretching out in every direction. This time of year, the wheat has taken on a beautiful color and is nearly ready for harvesting. My father-in-law originally lived in the city, but after retiring from his job, he built a house out here and moved. He used to live together with my mother-in-law, but she passed away 5 years ago. Since then, he's been living a relaxed life on his own. They should have been able to enjoy a leisurely life together. I thought about how I might not be able to stand living alone in such a big house as I vacuumed. Then, the intercom rang. A visitor. Who could it be at this early hour? I looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in suits who I'd never seen before. "Who is it?" I asked through the door. One of the men, who seemed kind, introduced himself. "Good morning, we're the police." "The police? Why at this hour?" I thought maybe they were patrolling the neighborhood and considered opening the door for a moment, but they were strangers after all. I decided to assess the situation a bit more and responded without opening the door. "Officers, may I ask what this is regarding?" The kindly-looking man replied, "We have a few questions we'd like to ask. Would you mind opening the door?" I wondered if something had happened to my father-in-law or Anya. Feeling a twinge of unease, I almost opened the front door without thinking, but I was alone after all. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that," the man pressed on. "Is there any way you could reconsider? We can't have a proper conversation like this. We're police officers, so there's nothing to worry about." He spoke in such a gentle tone, and hearing police officers put me at ease. I was just about to open the door when... "Hurry up and open this door." The gruff voice of the other tough-looking man made me catch myself. It snapped me back to my senses when my guard had started to come down. The man who had been kind up to now shot the tough-looking man a sharp glance. For a split second, I apologized. "That was rude of him to say." He quickly apologized, and the tough-looking man apologized too. "We haven't introduced ourselves, have we? I'm David. I'm Christopher. Now that we've given you our names, what do you say? Could you open up?" I couldn't get David's momentary change in expression out of my mind. "I think I'll keep talking to you like this after all." "So what did you want to ask me about?" David let out a deep sigh, and his kind tone from earlier completely changed. He delivered the shock news. "Your daughter Anya has an arrest warrant out for marriage fraud." My daughter was involved in marriage fraud and arrested? There's no way that could be true. I couldn't believe the words coming from the man claiming to be a police officer. How in the world did things get to this point? That's impossible. Please stop with this nonsense. I understand how you feel, but this is no nonsense, the other tough-looking man said with an intimidating expression. This is the truth. There's no way my daughter could be involved in marriage fraud because Anya is... Wait, could these men possibly be? At that moment, an idea for a plan popped into my head. To execute it, I first needed to keep them here somehow. Excuse me, are you listening to me? You have a daughter named Anya, correct? Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Anya is my daughter, but what is this about marriage fraud? I'd like to hear more details as her mother here, I said. Hearing this, David said, in that case, why don't you open the door so we can talk? Then we can fill you in on the specifics. Worn down by the men's persistence, I opened the front door a crack, agreeing to just a short conversation. You finally opened up, David said as he spoke. He tried to peer inside through the gap in the doorway. Seeing his face up close, he looked kinder than through the door, but it also looked like a face that inspired distress. Then the man named Christopher also peered at me through the door opening along with David. I felt a tinge of fear at the two faces looking in at me. David said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. He scares you, doesn't he? He's not a bad guy, but with that face, he can't help but frighten people." The way David was saying this had a huge smile, like a completely different person from earlier. About what you said before, is it true that my daughter committed marriage fraud and is even going to be arrested? Well, the thing is, we don't want to have to arrest a young woman either, but our higher-ups insist that we need to prosecute these kinds of things strictly, David said. In other words, it seems they don't want to make arrests themselves, but they have no choice since their boss tells them to. So, for whatever reason, you're saying you're going to arrest Anya, right? There's a possibility you may not need to have her arrested. The thing is, the victim said if they're paid, they'll act like this whole thing never happened. If we just pay money, she won't be arrested, Christopher said. What a forgiving victim, I muttered. Well, it's compensation money. Can you pay the compensation? Hey, you're scaring Miss Rowan. We're so sorry for frightening you there, Christopher said. Their true natures were rapidly becoming clear through their words and actions. By the way, how much is this compensation? $100,000, David said. $100,000? That much? There's no way I can pay $100,000 no matter what. In the first place, there's no way Anya could be involved in marriage fraud, I said. I could tell them the truth. But seeing me deep in thought, David said, $100,000 should be no problem if it's for your daughter, right? Let's hurry and pay to save her. We don't want to keep causing you grief, Miss Rowan. It seems their determination to make me pay $100,000 no matter what. In that case, I decided to take a certain action. Excuse me, there are a few things I'd like to ask, I said. What is it? David said. If you're police officers, would you mind showing me your badges? Our badges? No problem, David said, taking out a police badge from his back pants pocket and showing it to me. How's this? Christopher, could you show me yours too, please? Oh, sorry, I don't have it on me right now, Christopher said. What? You're a police officer, right? I believe it's illegal for officers not to carry their badge in situations like this, I said, just as I thought. I knew Christopher would slip up. Christopher started begging David for help. I'm so sorry, he's always like this. I'll give him a strict warning later, so please let it slide this time. This flow of events was just as I anticipated. I decided to press them further with an even more pointed question. Well, aren't you lenient, settling an illegal matter with just a warning? Oh, could it be that you're a fire-up in the police force? What? Oh, yes, that's right. I'm a police inspector, David said. What? A police inspector? That's amazing to be an inspector at such a young age, I said, continuing the conversation, matching David's tone so that he would think I was on his side. So that would make him your subordinate, right? Yes, something like that, David said, changing the subject. You mentioned my daughter committed marriage fraud. About how old are the victims? Let's see, 50, 45, and 24 years old, 3 people. So my daughter scammed 3 men at this point, I decided to inform them of a fact that made their story completely impossible. You know, you keep saying my daughter committed marriage fraud, but that's not possible. I understand you don't want to believe it, but you have to face the truth as her mother. You need to get your daughter to admit her crime. Her whole life is ahead of her. You're passionately spouting off these grand-sounding things, but it's all wrong because Anya just had her first birthday last month. The two men's faces went blank for a moment at my words, but then, 1-year-old? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? I know you don't want to pay compensation, but you can't tell such lies. They thought what I said was a lie and refused to believe me, but just then, oh, a visitor, perfect timing. My father-in-law, who had been out with Anya, came home. Huh? Who? My father-in-law and Anya, the daughter you were eager to meet. The men exchanged glances with surprised expressions. Noticing this, my father-in-law seemed to realize something. He told me to wait a moment and brought Anya inside the house. Scarlett, who are these gentlemen? They say they're the police, I said. The instant he heard that, my father-in-law's eyes sharpened. Oh, so you're police officers? And what brings you here? Has there been some serious incident? Taken aback by my father-in-law's intensity, the two men instinctively stepped back. My father-in-law pressed them further. Miss Rowan's daughter committed marriage fraud and the victims are seeking compensation, David said. Marriage fraud? Oh yes, that's right, my father-in-law said, hearing David's words. He immediately saw through the men's true identities. What a bizarre story. I'd love to know how a little girl who just turned 1 could commit marriage fraud. No, you're right, my father-in-law said. Even I, standing behind them, felt intimidated by my father-in-law's forcefulness. I can only imagine the terror the two men in front of him must be feeling. By the way, you said you're police officers. Do you have your badges with you? Miss Rowan asked the same thing earlier and I showed her, David said. May I see it too? Yes, here you go, David said, handing his police badge to my father-in-law. As soon as he saw the police badge handed to him, my father-in-law declared, it was fake. The two men hastily tried to deny it, but my father-in-law cornered them even further. Let's put aside the badge issue for now. Can you tell me what department you belong to, your employee numbers, and the phone number for your station, please? I belong to the Central Police Station, David from the Regional Division. My employee number is… sorry, it slipped my mind, David said, pressured by my father-in-law's sharp questioning. The tone of David faltered. The tough-looking Christopher seemed at a loss for what to do. My father-in-law asked Christopher as well. Did you forget, like him? Christopher reflexively nodded. My father-in-law then said, it's unacceptable for a police officer to forget their employee number. And this is the first I've heard of the Regional Division independently investigating marriage fraud. Well, there are all sorts of sections within the Regional Division. David tried to escape my father-in-law's questions somehow. Then you're David from the Regional Division at the Central Police Station, right? Would you mind if I called the station now to confirm? What? Call them? Why are you so surprised? Don't tell me you don't know the phone number for the station you belong to. Or is there something else bad going on? Under my father-in-law's interrogation, David was increasingly backed into a corner. Then Christopher, who had been watching from the side, shoved David out of the way and tried to lunge at my father-in-law. Seeing Christopher coming at him, my father-in-law braced himself. And right at that moment… Hello there. An older woman had come to visit. Miss Brown, thank you for the other day. Oh no, I should apologize for bothering you when you were busy. It was our neighbor, Miss Brown. I just called the police, so it's all right now. Thank you so much. It's a good thing I was passing by near here, Miss Brown said. Miss Brown had been on her way to go shopping when she happened to pass by our house. She saw my father-in-law being cornered by the two men and called the police. Well, my father-in-law was the one cornering them, but still, that was a close call. Mr. Rowan, things almost took a terrible turn, Miss Brown said. Yes, I'm so glad you happened to be passing by. That's what neighbors are for, dear. But if you were here, I suppose there was no need to call the police, was there? Miss Brown said this, and the two men beside her looked at her quizzically. Then Miss Brown revealed something to the two men that they never would have guessed. You see, this man is a former police officer. He was a police inspector. He retired and moved here, right? Miss Brown said. Yes, that was 5 years ago now, I said. Hearing this, the two men were so shocked that they couldn't even speak. They were utterly dejected. They sank to the ground right then and there, dumbfounded. Well, no one would ever expect the family member of the person you're trying to scam to be an ex-cop, Miss Brown said. 10 minutes later, the police arrived. The two men were apprehended on the spot and taken away by the police. My father-in-law was relieved that nothing bad happened, and I was relieved that Anya was unharmed. That night, the news quickly reported that the two men had been arrested on suspicion of fraud. They didn't belong to any fraud ring. Their crime was carried out with just the two of them. After quitting their jobs, the two had spent their days gambling nonstop, but quickly used up all their savings. Hard up for money to play with, it seems they targeted this area with its many seniors, plotting to commit fraud. After their faces were broadcast on TV, the two lost any chance at employment and are both now living on the streets. In any case, I'll never understand how someone could resort to the idea of defrauding others when they need money. But my father-in-law was watching the news with a different perspective than me. I saw more than enough guys like that when I was on active duty. I'm used to it, but it still stirs up indescribable feelings to see it now, my father-in-law said with a look on his face as if recalling the past. Back when I was a police inspector, I was investigating this fraud case. He launched into a story from over 20 years ago, back when he was an active police inspector. At the time, in the town where my father-in-law lived, there was a rampant fraud ring impersonating banks. The elderly were their primary targets. As the number of victims kept growing, my father-in-law desperately worked on the investigation. Among the victims, some people had their entire life savings swindled and were so distraught they attempted suicide. At that time, I swore to myself that I would catch the criminals no matter what, my father-in-law said, his eyes glistening as if the frustration from that time was still fresh. 3 months into the case, I finally tracked down the fraud group's hideout. I brought my men and raided the hideout. The criminals resisted to the end, but we managed to apprehend them all. Seeing the victims' happy faces then, it truly made me glad. My father-in-law smiled, looking a bit sheepish as he said this. His expression conveyed his strong sense of justice and his burning desire to protect people. Seeing those men today brought back memories of that old case. I absolutely can't forgive scum like them. A feeling of respect for my father-in-law welled up inside me, and I felt my eyes tearing up involuntarily. We're safe today, Anya and I both, thanks to you protecting us. I can't thank you enough. Don't mention it, my father-in-law replied. More importantly, are you still planning to head home today? I said, after everything that happened today, I'm exhausted. I think we'll stay one more night, I said. He cheerfully responded, Is that so? Then let's all have a nice dinner together tonight, Father. When you say all, it's still just me and Anya, huh? I said. That's not true. I properly invited him, so don't worry, my father-in-law said. Invited who? On Earth? I wondered. Just as I was wondering this, I heard the front door open forcefully. I could hear footsteps coming this way, and then... Scarlett, Anya, are you all right? My husband said. What, honey, why? What about work? My husband had driven 5 hours to get here right after the men were taken away by the police. My father-in-law had sent my husband an email. Seeing the email from my father-in-law while at work, my husband left early and rushed straight here. I heard you got caught up in some incident, but are you okay? Are you hurt? Do you need to go to the hospital? My husband said. I'm fine. Nothing's wrong. I'm so glad to hear that, my husband said. Just then, Anya, who had been napping beside me, woke up. As soon as she saw my husband, she uttered a single word, Dada. In that instant, I broke into a smile as if the day's events had been a lie. And so, for the first time in a while, we enjoyed a meal together as a family. Later on, I had an opportunity to get together with the neighborhood housewives, including Miss Brown. They all said in unison, Thank goodness your father-in-law is a former police officer. Yes, I was so scared at the time, but we're safe thanks to my father-in-law protecting us, I said. To think that the Rowans were targeted too. We need to be careful ourselves. That's right. Just because it's a quiet area, we can't let our guard down, the housewives said, wearing anxious expressions as they called out to each other to be cautious. The incident seemed to have sent shockwaves through the entire community. Back at home, I gazed at Anya playing with my father-in-law and found myself thinking that the life we thought was peaceful could be threatened at the slightest trigger. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel the reassurance of having someone there to protect us. I'm so glad we have you, Father. I don't know what would have happened if I had been alone, I said. Then I felt a renewed appreciation for the bonds of a supportive family and the importance of community ties. Gampa, oh Anya, looking good today too, I see, my husband said. Anya hugged my father-in-law and nuzzled his cheek. He happily welcomed it. Watching the two of them, I felt the warmth of family permeate my heart. "Thank you for watching Anya, Father," I said. "What are you talking about? Seeing my granddaughter's face is my greatest joy. Come over any time," my father-in-law said, smiling bashfully. That incident was certainly a frightening experience, but at the same time, it was an event that taught me the strength of family and community bonds. It was scary, but it made me realize what's truly important: the connections between people. That's the most precious thing. With this vow in my heart, I squeezed Anya and my father-in-law's hands, smiling. Let's conclude the story shortly. The incident with the fake police officers was a wake-up call for Scarlett and her family. It made them realize that even in a seemingly peaceful area, danger could lurk around any corner. But it also highlighted the strength of their family bonds and the importance of community support. Anya, now a happy and healthy toddler, continued to thrive under the loving care of her parents and grandparents. The memory of the incident faded, replaced by the warmth of family gatherings and the joy of everyday life. Scarlett, with a renewed appreciation for her family and neighbors, continued to live her life with cautious optimism. The experience had taught her to be vigilant, but it had also strengthened her belief in the goodness of people and the power of community. As for her father-in-law, he continued to be a pillar of strength for his family, his experience as a police officer providing a sense of security and peace of mind. He often told stories of his time on the force, his voice filled with both pride and a quiet determination to protect those he loved. Life went on, but the incident had left an indelible mark on the Rowans. It was a reminder that while life can be unpredictable, the love and support of family and community can provide a sense of safety and security, even in the face of adversity. After experiencing the full journey of our story, we'd love to hear your thoughts. How did the story resonate with you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay blessed. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.